Hello everyone, my name is Jean O'Brien and I'm delighted to have been asked to read at the Fingal Poetry Festival. Thanks to Enda Coyle Green and to all the committee members and to our able cameraman, Sean Leonard. Some people listening will know my work and some won't. A lot of my work is based on a subject I probably won't touch on in this reading, so it's a slight contradiction. Quite a lot of my early work certainly was based on my mother, who was manic depressive and killed herself the summer I turned 15. So, hopefully it's not too grim when I do read poems about that, if such a subject can be not grim. I will be reading one poem about her though, and other than that I'm a bit of a magpie I write about current affairs, I write about women's issues, basically anything that takes my fancy. So at the moment, there's a comet in the air, in the heavens. I can't tell you the name of it, it's some complicated name. And it's out at the moment and visible over the skies of Ireland and Dublin certainly. I haven't managed to see it yet. But years ago, about 10 years ago, there was another comet over Ireland when I lived in the Midlands in the countryside, where you could get a fabulous look at all the stars at night, and I wrote a poem about a comet then, so I sort of felt it would be relevant to now, and it's called Watching for the Comet, and it has an introduction by Marina Tsvetaeva, the Russian poet, who says, "For the paths of comets is the path of poets, they burn without warning. Towards the west, a small celestial trail spirals the sky and nets me. Jubilant stars in its wake, so pinprick bright, I could trace them with my fingertips. Their old, cold light clusters like a chorus, chanting for the dead. All my kith and kin, known and unknown, trailing their light for me, to read in the night sky. My head is heavy, like a newborn, as I stargaze. I see Venus, Earth's sister, and I see the lemon moon's pale slice. Then I feel Earth's grip slip from me. I am unhitched, no longer bound. I lose my bearing in a sea of fiery stars. Floating in the firmament, I have become an adumbrated body of falling light." This poem I want to read is about being in the labour ward, and I think any woman anyway, who's laboured in a labour ward will remember the sound whenever she might hear it again. And my daughter, who is now in her mid-20s, but at the time I wrote this poem was in her teens, and we were having a difficult time, the two of us, and I was doing housework around the house with the radio on in the background, and suddenly this voice sort of pierced my reverie and made the hairs stand up on the back of my head, and I realised it was my midwife's voice. I had a male midwife, a lovely man called Pat, but just hearing his voice brought me right back. So back to basics. On the radio today played a voice I knew. Last heard, it was urging me to work harder. Deep tones that hushed me through that long ago troubled night now spread about my bedroom, where, just dressed, I checked my wardrobe for stashed Christmas presents. Check the Santa stocking with my now grown daughter's name, while our male midwife's soothing voice seems to urge us on again, to heal the rifts between teenage daughters and mothers and bring us back to basics, to that shimmering May night where I heard again his insistent voice, push now, push on past the pain. Thank you. This next one is one I wrote about my mother I found a beautiful photo, well, I was given by an aunt of mine that I had never seen before, of my mother as a young girl in one of those quite classical photos of her on a swing and her hair streaming out behind her, and she's probably 17 or 18 in the photo, and it's long before her sort of mental breakdowns and all her troubles, and I just thought it was a lovely picture and wanted to write about it, and it's called The Arc of a Swing in Autumn. When she is seated, the swing's ropes pull taut, then arc from the ground to the sky, chasing the crest of the moon. Higher and higher she pushes. Branches hold their silence as the wind rushes by. Shadows scatter and are undone. She goes to ground. Displaced air hauls its light cargo back. This is her cradle, her sling. Its highs and lows hold her in a temporary bow as she spans the distance between grass and mid-air. She is shattering the light of the sun. I hold her image framed. I know it is autumn because the leaves are gone. All I can see is the outline of the tree and my mother on the swing in a time before me. I've got a couple of newer poems. This is from my collection, advertisement going on here, from my collection Fish on a Bicycle. It was my new and selected and reprinted in 2018, but I do obviously have newer poems because I'm getting a new collection ready for hopefully next year. I was lucky enough to be involved in the thing some of you may have heard about, that Carol Ann Duffy, the last Poet Laureate in the UK, has been running over in Manchester University, where poets write. It's called Write Where You Are Now, and it's poets write about where they are during the lockdown. I know it's eased up a little, but we had to put the date of when the poem was finished, if such a thing is ever finished. And my one, I live near Kilmainham, and I don't know if people know it at all, but the IMA, the Home for Old Soldiers, the museum, it's now the Modern Art Museum, it was taken over and closed down as a temporary morgue that luckily we didn't have to use, and hopefully we won't have to. So I wrote it about this idea, and it's called Triage. Fish swim through streets like cars, gills working, mouths agape. The trees try moving, thrust their limbs out to the far reaches of the road. Magpies and crows wrest the skies back from squabbling gulls, and clouds are high, puffed and glorious. At night, Venus makes herself known. She outshines the tiny, votive vigil lights. I live in the triangle of a makeshift morgue, a disused prison, and an overworked hospital. Or perhaps it is a trinity. The world lulls its focus to triage, separate, sort, and select. Our days blur and are long-sided, narrow in their reach. We try to stay inside, keep track of ghastly figures, our friends, our families. We avert our gaze, try not to see the distorted fish, or our hands as broken cradles. The second, not quite as new as that was written on the 20th of April this year, but this was written last year, and I was lucky enough to get it involved, there's the postcard. I was lucky enough to get it involved in the Poems on the Dart that Poetry Ireland ran last year. And this poem is called Child, and it was originally published in the Lee Green Down anthology that Eileen Casey edited, and it was for us to respond to poems by Patrick Kavanagh. And I'm responding to his poem of the same name, Child. And I wrote mine for the lost children of Tuam's mother and baby home, that disgraceful part of our history. They went, those children, into dark places, not of the soul, but into the cold earth, and all the while the lean wind stripped their bones. Down, down they went, in tens, in dozens, like puppets or shadow dolls. The ragged scrim that wrapped them frayed in the hungry wind. The unforgiving sky is full of stars. The dome of dank earth is full of missing children. Hush, we know you are lost, child. We will find you. I'll finish up on a poem that one of my books was called after, and it was a very lucky poem for me, called Merman, and I won the Arvon International with it. And at the time that I won it, it was the largest money amount of a prize for a single poem. I got £10,000 for it. And as anyone who knows me knows, I went off on a cruise to the Caribbean, as you do, when you get happy money. And it's called Merman, and it's based on mythology of a myth about a chap called Glaucus, who was sort of magical. He was a fisherman, and he was always eating this weed, which, if you look back on it, I think he was eating wacky backy or something of that ilk. And he fancied this woman, Scylla, who did not fancy him, and it ended badly, and he raped her. So there we go. I brought it into a modern day setting. I had been working in the fish farm for weeks, that one near the river outlet and the sea. I didn't like the work. We were constantly wet, dirty. Didn't like the men there either. They were insolent, often dropped small fry and crushed them underfoot. One in particular, Glaucus, tall, muscular, cast his sea-green eyes over me, tried to lure me as I tipped phosphorus feed into the holding pens that smoked and stank and made mist veils I tried to hide within. One day he walked towards the tanks, waders held in his large hands. He was chewing on a herb he said was magical, always urging me to eat it. I would not bite. Anyway, whatever way it was, he leaned to pull the waders on. Both legs got caught in one boot, and over he flipped. I cast around for help. No one was there. I went back. He was emerging from amongst the shoals of salmon. Clinging to his single wader, up to his waist were the glittering scales of smolts. He rose shaking, coloured sequins waterfalling as he tried to right himself and beckoned me for help. I took the bait, and when I caught him, we stumbled. He landed me and pinned me down. I looked, held his eyes. It was early. The rising sun was flooding them with hooks of golden light. I said no. He parted my thighs, and when it was over, untangled his legs, shook the silver armour from himself. His eyes had lost their lustre. I left distraught and walked all day, stumbling over ditches and hillocks, stopped now and then to eat, following the river to its source. At so many 100 feet I rested where the stream welled from the earth, cooled my toes, kicked gravel into little pools, and felt the flow snagging in the waters of my womb. I cried and screamed and shook my fists at the sky, knew then this birthing pool was to be my fate, tried to obliterate his sea-green eyes, his face, his terrible merman tail. On that happy note, thank you.